Today we're checking out filming locations for another classic from 1985. This one starring James Spader, Robert Downey Jr., Kim Richards. Of course, I'm talking about Tuff. And these locations are spread all around Los Angeles. We've got a lot of ground to cover today. So let's go see what we can find.
Hey, no bike riding on campus.
You ever shoot anybody with that thing? After we see Morgan riding his bike around the city during the opening credits, we then find ourselves in a place that I know very well. We see Nick and the rest of his crew hanging out in front of a newsstand on Reseda Boulevard. And right here is where that newsstand was. Okay, so here's what I find to be really crazy. So obviously these buildings have been remodeled. They don't look the same. The front of the buildings is completely different. However, these two lines right here on the end of the building, these can be seen in the movie, so that's still there. But even crazier than that, when Morgan is riding away on his bike, there's a guy right down here holding the car antenna, waiting to use it on Morgan like a sword. And right behind him, you can see this barber pole. I cannot believe that that is still here all of these years later. And also this tree, obviously it's grown, it's gotten bigger, but you can see this tree and this barber pole. Can't believe it. Now, to be clear, the Reseda yarn store building that Frankie's leaning up against, I do believe that was torn down and used to be located where this parking lot now is. This check cashing place would have been the bar that the guy comes walking out of. And those two lines that I showed you on the building a moment ago, those would have been the lines located on the right side of the building. So not very recognizable anymore, but that house right there behind me, that was the Hiller residence where Morgan lived with his parents. And the home actually looked pretty similar to how it did in Tuff up until a few years ago. Sometime around 2020, they did a complete renovation of the house, making it look a lot more modern and not too recognizable anymore. When Morgan's leaving for school, he stops in the front yard to talk to his dad really quick, who's just getting home from his night shift driving a taxi cab, and you can see this house next door, which still looks pretty similar to how it did in the movie. Morgan then rides his bike across the yard and down the street, and this isn't too recognizable either because that facility across the street, which I'm not too sure what it was, I believe that was torn down sometime around 2015, and this structure was built in its place. So nothing here is too recognizable except for all of these utility poles lining the street. This is the Redondo Beach Performing Arts Center, but back in the day, this was Aviation High School, and in Tuff, this was Lawson High School. Now, at the time of filming Tuff, Aviation High School had already been shut down, and sometime after filming, they tore down all of the original classrooms, which used to be right over there where those office buildings now are. However, the school's auditorium, which is right here, along with the gym and the track, all of those were saved and still remain today, and 2 out of 3 of them can be seen in the movie. So this is the Performing Arts Center, which used to be the school auditorium, and on his first day of school, Morgan gets yelled at by the security guard because you're not allowed to ride your bike on campus, and that would have happened right here. This used to be the front of the school, Now what's really cool is there's one shot where you can see the gym behind the security guard, and that's still here. We can't get the exact same shot because there's trees blocking it, but right there in front of me, that's the school gym. And like I said, you can see it behind the security guard. He probably would have been standing somewhere over here, and then that's the building that you can see behind him. So the security guard is standing over there. Morgan's out here riding his bike around in circles, arguing with the security guard. And if you look really quick, like, I mean, you got to pause the movie, you can actually see these two houses behind Morgan. So after class, Morgan is walking with Jimmy on the second story of the building that used to be right here. And he looks over here and he sees Nick and his friends. They're doing donuts in their car and Nick is riding his bike. Now, one thing that's still here that you can see in that shot is this liquor store right here. So it was right here where they were doing the donuts and Nick was going around in circles on the bike. And one thing that's still here that you can just barely see in the movie is that mobile gas station. You can just barely see it in a couple of shots. But something that's still here that you can see pretty well in a couple of shots is this apartment building across the street. Now it has been remodeled, but it's definitely recognizable, and it even still has those same bricks in the front with the circles. Another thing you can see in the movie is that staircase going up the hill. It has changed a bit. I think in the movie it goes straight and then cuts to the left, and now the entire thing is just angled. So like I mentioned, the actual Performing Arts Center building, this used to be the school auditorium, and it's been remodeled a bit, but this section over here looks just like it did in the movie, and you can see it quite a few times. Right there, that's the exact spot where Morgan's standing when the car pulls up and the guy spray paints his face. Now when the guy takes the car down to the other end of the parking lot, that's right down there, and you can see a sign behind him that says TRW, and it's kind of hard to see from here, but it's that sign right there. TRW later became Northrop Grumman, and it's still that today. That's what the sign now says. So the car comes racing towards Morgan from down there, and Morgan is standing right over here, standing his ground, watching as the car barrels towards him, and of course, the car ends up hitting Morgan's bike, sending it flying up into the air, and when it does, you can see the top of the Performing Arts Center. So the big warehouse where Morgan goes to see Jimmy's band play, which is actually fronted by Jim Carroll, that scene was filmed right here in this building behind me. This building is currently advertised as a place that you can rent out for weddings and other large events, but I guess they don't want to let anybody in. I reached out to them multiple times to try and get inside and see the building, and they finally responded back to me and said that they're currently not showing the building to anybody. They're not booking any events here, so not really sure what's going on. I actually have a friend that works here on this street, and he was telling me that like nothing ever goes on at this space, so not really sure what's going on with that, but this is where that scene was filmed. Now the outside of the warehouse, that was filmed somewhere else, and some people believe that it was filmed at the Pan Pacific Auditorium, and there's at least a couple of shots where you can see the building behind them, and it does look really similar to the Pan Pacific Auditorium, so it's possible. The problem is the Pan Pacific Auditorium no longer exists. It burned down years ago, so we're not really able to come here and check it out and match things up. This is where the Pan Pacific Auditorium used to be. They built this building behind me that is like a little replica of what the front of the auditorium looked like, and that's cool. But yeah, so that scene where Nick and his friends are roughing up Morgan and then they steal the car that he had already stolen, there is a good chance that that was filmed here, quite possibly in between the auditorium and maybe the skating rink. I just can't say for sure, but yeah, good chance that was filmed right here. So after they steal the car from Morgan that he already stole, we see them coming down this street, and then they make a right turn onto Beverly Boulevard. We see this gas station, we see this apartment building, which still looks the same. All of the windows and everything still match up. They make the right turn and they head down the street this way. And everything over here looks the same as well. The guardrail against the building. Of course, some of the signage is gone, some of the businesses have changed, but for the most part, everything here looks like it did. Now this is just one more clue that that previous scene may have in fact been filmed at the Pan Pacific Auditorium, because this gas station is just a couple of blocks away from where the Pan Pacific Auditorium used to be, which is where they're supposedly driving away from when they pass by this gas station. However, when they're driving in the stolen Porsche and they get pulled over by the police, they're now in a completely different area. They're now on Reseda Boulevard, just north of Sherman Way, just about 2 blocks north of where the very first scene in the movie takes place. Now, there's quite a few buildings here that you can see, but they're kind of hard to recognize. They're pretty blurry. I guess because I grew up in the area, I was able to recognize them right away. I think probably the most noticeable building is the Allen's Flower Market on the corner of Sherman Way and Reseda. You can then see them pass by this building on the corner of Reseda and Wyandotte Street. Now, it's been a lot of different things over the years. I remember it being an arcade, and it was probably an arcade at the time of filming. We then see them pass by the Reseda post office, and I recognize this right away. I think this is what gave it away for me. Now, there's no longer all of those newsstands under the awning in front, but there is still a couple of newsstands right here in front in the same place that you see in the movie. Now this is right about the time that they get pulled over, so they stop just past Valerio Street in front of what's now a CVS, but at the time it was Indoor Auto Sales, and you can see when they pull over it's a used car lot. Now also across the street you can just barely make out the Foster's Freeze, which is no longer there. It's now where this apartment building is. After getting into a fight with his brother, Morgan leaves the house and he's sitting on a bus bench that would have been somewhere right about here. That shopping center across the street, everything has changed there. All of those businesses are different. There are some office buildings that you can see off in the distance. Those are still there, but they're kind of hard to see now. They're blocked by other stuff. But as Morgan's sitting here on the bench, he then notices Nick's car driving by. It screeches to a halt and then starts to chase after Morgan. Morgan then comes running down this alley and the car chases after him, and when the car turns into the alley, you can see a house which is no longer there, along with Culver City Pet Supplies, which is no longer there as well. Well, the building is still there, but it's no longer Culver City Pet Supplies. But one thing that is still there is the Jack-in-a-Box. You can definitely see that Jack-in-a-Box in the movie. So Morgan runs down the alley and he runs right over to here, and in the movie there was a wall right here. Now I think that that was a fake wall that was put here just for the movie, but I have no proof of that. But the car comes down the alley and he jumps right over the hood of the car. Now at the time there was another fence right here with barbed wire on top of it, and Morgan realizes he has nowhere else to go, so he starts to climb over the fence. He then falls off, and right when he thinks the car is going to hit him, Jimmy gets out of the car. It turns out that it's just Jimmy, and they have a little laugh, and they get in the car and they drive off. Now we do get a shot looking down this alley, and you can see these two houses right here, which still look the same. We see Frankie and her friends having lunch, sitting outside of a burger joint. That was filmed here at Sandy's Burgers, also famously used in the movie Better Off Dead. Now, unfortunately, Sandy's Burgers shut down a while back. It's now gated off. It's used as some type of a storage yard, but luckily the building is still here. They would have been sitting right here at a table right in front of the building. Those are the same front doors that you see in the movie, just everything has been painted gray. And another thing that you can see behind them, and it's still here, is this motel right next door. Now we're not able to get the same shot that we see in the movie because I would have to be standing over there by the table where they were sitting, but like I said, you can see the motel. So after Frankie smashes the burger in her friend's face, she gets up to leave, and that's about the time that we see Morgan come around the corner, and he passes right by this storage place, which at the time was a Beckons self-storage. It's now called Studio Self-Storage, and He comes around the corner right there, and as he's driving right here, he notices Frankie, and he comes right over here and he makes a U-turn, and we see this body shop, we see that apartment building, we see all of that. He makes a U-turn and then he pulls up and parks right here. Now there's actually two different shots of them passing by Joe's Liquor, and in the second shot you can see the sign on the liquor store a bit better. Now right here, this is where Joe's Liquor was in the movie, and I guess in real life later on Joe's Liquor moved about a block over, and it's still a liquor store but with a different name. Right there, that's the sign that you see in the movie that says Joe's Liquor. Now the country club scene was filmed at two different locations. The exteriors of the country club were actually filmed here at the Hyatt Regency in Westlake Village, and this hotel was also used in The Karate Kid. Morgan's car would have been parked right here, and when Frankie gets out of the car, you can see this section of the hotel, but it's now blocked by these trees. Now the interior of the country club ballroom where that amazing band is performing, that was filmed somewhere else. However, the interior of the country club lobby, that was also filmed here at the Hyatt Regency. Unfortunately though, as I'm sure you can tell, the interiors of this entire hotel have completely changed since the movie was made. Nothing looks like it did. I mean, you can still tell where everything was, but nothing looks the same as it did in 1985. Now for the interiors of the country club ballroom, that was filmed at the Riviera Country Club in the Pacific Palisades. And like most country clubs, it's private and off limits to the public unless you have a lot of money. I did try saying that I left my country club ID in my locker, but it didn't work. So the first time that we see where Frankie lives is when Nick's friends are hanging out by the car, which is parked right here, and Nick is upstairs talking to Frankie. This liquor store on the corner, this is the liquor store that Frankie's dad owns, and then Frankie and her dad live upstairs on top of the liquor store. Now, from what I can tell, nothing has changed here on this building. As far as I can see, everything still looks the same. It still has that neon sign that says coldest beer in town. It's got the neon liquor store sign. And yeah, everything here is still looking the same. Now, like I said, this is the first time we see this building, but not the last. This is the old Aviation High School gym, and like I mentioned earlier, it's one of three things that was saved, and it was inside this gym, inside of the locker rooms, where Morgan gets attacked by Nick and his friends, and they put the padlocks in the towels and beat him with it. Unfortunately, according to their website, sometime in the 90s, the locker rooms were remodeled, completely updated, so they do not look the same anymore. However, there's some windows that you can see in one shot, and if we head right over here, there's those windows. So yeah, the inside of the locker room's completely remodeled, but luckily, at least they didn't replace the windows. Those still completely match up. Frankie's in her bedroom playing dress up when she hears music coming from outside. She takes a peek out of her bedroom window and finds Morgan standing on the wall. And right here is where he was standing. You can still see the utility pole that he was standing next to, and that wall is still there. It's just now covered by this gate. Of course, this building is the one that said Bowlerama. Unfortunately, it's no longer a bowling alley. Frankie looks down at Morgan from her bedroom window, which was the third one from the left. And like I said, here's that wall that Morgan was standing on top of. It's still here and still looks the same. Now he hops off that wall and he heads up the stairs to Frankie's bedroom. Those stairs right there. As you can see, not a lot has changed back here. He heads up these stairs and right to Frankie's bedroom window, which would have been that one right there. Now this is pretty cool. I'm currently standing right next to Frankie's bedroom window, but these really are apartments, so obviously I'm not going to point my camera at the window. Frankie goes over to the Hiller house to have dinner, but ends up getting angry and storming out, and Morgan comes outside to chase after her. Now we see Morgan walking down the sidewalk, walking after Frankie, and the camera pans over and we see that Nick is sitting in his car directly across the street watching everything that's going on, and we see Morgan walk right past this fence. This appears to be the exact same fence. So originally I thought it was the same fence, but after taking a second look I noticed the wood is different, so maybe not.
I gotta go see my girlfriend now.
So Nick's driving around, he's driving all night trying to find Morgan's dad, and one of the many places that he passes by is the Sherman Oaks newsstand right here on the corner of Van Nuys Boulevard and Ventura Boulevard. Now if we look up here at the sign, you can see it says Sherman Oaks newsstand since 1949, but if we look right here, it's closed and it's got a for rent sign. So sadly, it looks like the Sherman Oaks newsstand will not be here much longer. Now this has obviously been here my entire life. I recognized it right away in the movie. I remember stopping here quite a few times to read a magazine while I was walking over to the pizza place next door. Nick pulls up to an intersection and comes to a stop right in front of this Mexican food restaurant, which surprisingly is still here and has actually grown. It was about half this size in the movie. So not only is it still here all these years later, but it's gotten bigger. So good for them on their success. Now after driving around all night looking for him, he finally finds Morgan's dad, stopped in front of this building grabbing a newspaper. His taxi would have been parked right there on the other side of that bus stop. Now all of those newspaper dispensers are now gone, but the building still looks pretty similar. So after pretending that they're running out of gas, Nick makes a left turn and parks right across the street from where the newspaper dispensers are. He would have parked his car right about here. Frankie tries to warn Mr. Hiller, but of course it's too late. Nick and his friends attack him, and Morgan's dad and Nick end up getting into a big fight right here. Things get out of hand, and Nick ends up pulling out a gun and shooting Morgan's dad, and he falls against the wall right here in between this door and this window. Since then, this window's been boarded up. They don't use this section of the building anymore, but right here is where he gets shot, and of course he falls onto the sidewalk right here. So Morgan's dad is near death. Nobody's really sure whether or not he's gonna make it, and Morgan decides that would be a good time to hook up with Frankie. Makes sense to me. Now after that takes place, we see Morgan and Frankie standing right here in front of the liquor store. He kisses her goodbye. Shortly after that, Frankie's inside the liquor store talking with her dad, telling him that she doesn't want to be with Nick anymore. Now that's about the time that Nick comes walking through the front door and he goes berserk. He starts tearing stuff up, throwing stuff at Frankie, knocking her around. He ends up knocking Frankie's dad into a display, and all of that happens right here inside of the liquor store. So for the big finale of the movie, where we have that big fight between Morgan and Nick, we find ourselves back at the same warehouse where Morgan goes earlier to see Jimmy's band play. So that's gonna do it for this video. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.